Well, greetings, everyone, and welcome to a special online event today called Discover the Experiential Depth Approach to the Enneagram, exploring the territory beyond your personality type. My name is Stephen Dine. I'm the president and CEO of the Shift Network, and I'm really delighted to be here with you today, learning from two of the world-renowned experts in the Enneagram, and not just the Enneagram, but really going beyond the Enneagram into the deeper mystical dimensions of our being and showing how that bridges with our personality in very profound ways. With us today, we have Russ Hudson and Jessica Dibb. They have together really forged a path that reanimates the mystical dimensions of the Enneagram, marries it with embodiment practices, and shows how we can essentially approach the Enneagram as a spiritual system of transformation, which I think is so helpful for us to really experience the highest and best benefits from this system. So we could go into their bios, and they were publicized, but basically there's two of the most eminent thinkers and writers and teachers out there. They've had many programs at the Shift Network, and they have taught all over the world, and we're really blessed to be learning from them today. So welcome, Russ, and welcome, Jessica.
Hi. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Delight.
Great. Well, we're going to have this hour with the two of them, and I want to let everyone know right up front that we have a chance to go much deeper with them in a brand new 17-week program called the Experiential Depth Approach to the Enneagram. Embody the virtues, live your essence, and ground higher realizations in your daily life. It's really going to be a very deep dive to the frontiers of this work and how it can aid you in your own healing, transformation, and ultimately liberation. So very exciting. We'll share a little bit more about that towards the end of the hour. So let's start, Russ, with a little bit of context with you. Sort of, we're going beyond personality today, and we're talking about the depth dimension. So maybe if you could bring a little bit of your own history, like how did the Enneagram help to open up these deeper dimensions of your being and illumine a path to beyond the personality?
Okay, well, that's a really rich question, Stephen, and one that's very relevant to what we'll be talking about. I think, like a lot of people, I got first interested in this whole possibility of human development. What did that entail? What did that look like? I was seeing a lot of people meditating and doing practices and so forth. But I also became aware as I was learning about these things that there were ways that I would sometimes make breakthroughs or come to some deeper quality of realization, but then I just go right back to doing the same crazy stuff I was doing before. And it was curious to me how there was a part of me that was very sincere, really wanted to wake up, really wanted to do something worthwhile in my life and on this planet. But at the same time, there was another part of me that just was really asleep to that, didn't care less, was focused on other matters. And it was strange to me that these two very different parts could live in the same guy. And so, I went into studies of different meditation practices, different teachers, sat with various gurus. But I found the fourth way, or the teaching behind the Enneagram. And I found that way back in the 1970s. And I was very impressed with how it was a work of integrating our normal lives, our normal consciousness into a bigger consciousness. It wasn't just some idea of transcending the personhood, but rather of bringing the transcendent perspective into the personhood, which seemed much more important to me. And then, of course, as I continued to study, I learned that that was really an ancient traditional perspective on what the aim of spiritual work is. So when I learned about the Enneagram typing system, which I learned about in the 1980s, and I met Don Richard Riso, who I ended up working with and writing books with for many years, I became very fascinated by how the Enneagram typology maps out the core patterns that we tend to get stuck in and through which we forget what our real heart's desire is, what our deeper sense of purpose might be, and we forget our more innate and natural connection to the cosmos. which sounds, kind of highfalutin. But when we actually get right down to experiencing these things, really experiencing what makes our personality tick, not just describing it, but getting into the guts of it, and then also bringing this bigger perspective of presence, awareness, consciousness, whatever you want to call it, in a more holistic way to those patterns, then it starts to not just be vacations in higher consciousness, but actually starts to affect the life that I'm living. And I realized that was what I wanted to do for myself, and I have always hoped that what I've learned about that would be helpful to other people too, which is what I'm hoping to do here in this course.
Great. Well, Jessica, I know one of the things that so your history came a lot out of more psychological and breathwork kind of modalities and embodiment practices, and you really fused those into the work with the Enneagram, sort of this bringing the transcendent into a more embodied form, as Russ was alluding to. I'd love for you to share a little bit more about how this depth approach, the Enneagram, emerged in you.
Well, it almost feels miraculous to me, Stephen, because from the time I was a little girl, it was so apparent to me that everyone was profoundly endowed with gifts of tremendous beauty, tremendous intelligence, that everybody was sort of a unique emanation of whatever creation is. And it was sort of bewildering to my young mind about why it was that these gifts couldn't flow more readily into our world. So I, like Russ, was on a very deep search from quite young in my life and went through all different kinds of experiences in the arts and in the healing arts and in living in a yoga ashram for 4 years and living in India and all of that kind of stuff and science. And what I discovered was that, yes, it's not that hard to have people get a transcendent experience of what their real potential is. It takes some courage and a little bit of effort, but you can through different methodologies, and certainly breath work was one of them for me, but all kinds of meditation and mystical paths and inquiry and psychology and dance and different spiritual lineages. But what I found, like Russ, was that it was just so interesting to me that here we would get this sense of liberation, this sense of who we actually are. I mean, what more? It's such a unifying experience. It's such a profoundly fulfilling experience to feel who you actually are as love, as wisdom, as presence. And then I would just notice that somewhere between 3 seconds and 3 weeks after a person would have that experience, or I would, it was like something very craftily would come in and sort of co-opt all the energy of the awakening and start to use it for some purpose that seemed very much similar to what we'd been doing before. I'm just going to say from a kind of defensive egoic perspective. And then we could work it through again and get a little inch or two of progress. But when I came across the Enneagram, it was like an explosion of guidance. Guidance for what it is that's capturing our attention.
Beautiful. Thank you. A lot of different dimensions of what you were sharing there. But Russ, let's go back to you and this notion that it's like the 9 aspects are kind of pointing to where we get stuck or constricted or limited, and that it's like then there's a pathway of unfolding that into a deeper or truer expression. I'd love for you to share more about that, how there's like a developmental process of realizing these higher expression, freeing up from the fixations.
Yeah, certainly. I think it takes a long time for human beings. Certainly it took a long time for this human being, but it takes a while before we start to understand that the orientation that we're walking around the world with and what we're taking ourselves to be is a very, very small part of what we actually are. Now, we like it when various masters from the East or from the West tell us that we're part of the divine reality, that we're expressions of love and so forth. But it doesn't take a genius to see that that's not what's driving the car most of the time, that we're caught in something, as Jess was just saying. It's as if we begin to notice we're living two lives at the same time. One is our ordinary preoccupations, our ordinary concerns, our obsessions, what we fantasize about, what we daydream about, what we avoid, what freaks us out. And it's just a whole ongoing stream of mental and emotional associations and reactions that we live in most of the time. But we have another life that appears, kind of comes up from between the cracks from time to time. We occasionally remember, and it does feel like remembering when it happens, that there's something more to us. We notice that there is a deeper element to our experience than we were noticing just a moment before. Now, the more conventional view that we find on a lot of paths is we're trying to get out of that one stream and into the other. We're trying to leave the ordinary egoic concerns and just hang out forever in the great vastness and depth and beauty of our inner nature. But as Jess was just saying, vis-a-vis the triadic structure of the Enneagram, and as we might also grasp intuitively as we consider our own lives, what we're really after is not these vacations in our deeper consciousness, wonderful though they are and as impactful as they are. We want to actualize those realizations. We want to integrate. And for that, we need a kind of inner marriage. We need a marriage of our embodied physical self, to be sure. We need an integration of our emotional life. We need an integration of our mental life. But all of that starts to be transformed by its contact with the depth. Most people, for example, might think that we're in the real world, but you take a few breaths, you get a little more in touch with the sense of the body here and now, and you can see that in a certain way, you're not exactly here in the way that you can be. So the whole point here is to bring, again, these deeper qualities of consciousness into the ins and outs of our daily life. And in that process, those structures that we usually live by and that we identify with to a large degree relax and take their correct place. Some of them, if they're unnecessary, dissolve, but others are around, but they're now part of a more meaningful whole, which Jessica was also just speaking about. I think that understanding that mentally, many people can grasp or remember or think about times where that's been the case. And we can say, yes, I have had those experiences. That makes a lot of sense to me. On the other hand, staying with the experiences, deepening the experiences, and living out the implications of them is another matter. So another way I might say this is I think there's a lot of tools and practices and teachings about the process of realization, which is discovering that there is this second life. There is this deeper sense of what human beings are. Not just me, but sheesh, everybody. Some of us notice it and live out of it from time to time. But I really think that the actualization is what the Enneagram helps with. Mm-hmm. The Enneagram helps us actually live and integrate those deeper realizations with the life that we have, so that we can bring that kind of depth of awareness and compassion and wisdom to our families, to our work, to our clients, to, as I said, just to the reality of our life. And it's really a study in how the transcendent actually comes into the immanence of our direct experience in the here and now. and in a way that we can stay with it.
Jessica, let's go over to you, and I'd love for you to share a little bit about how you can approach each type. So we're assuming most people who are coming to this call have at least some, conversant reality with the Enneagram. And so how you can approach each type through the lens of the three different centers, the belly, heart, and head, as a way to do this incarnational descent, if you will, this sort of embodiment of the deeper qualities.
That's a beautiful question. And for me, one of the most powerful aspects of this actualization process that Russ was just talking about, how do we actually reconstellate our neurological pathways, for instance, and even the way our muscles work, so that we're stabilizing these higher states or higher realizations in the vicissitudes of a human life. And I think that the three-centered nature of the Enneagram has helped with this in a very practical, but also expansive and luminous way. So if we think of our personalities in, I would say, not only a compassionate way, but real truth of the matter, our personalities are a defense against ever feeling like we're separated from the source again. It is so painful to feel that wrenching terror, that pain, and then the resulting terror that each of us feels when we are not connected to the fact that we're all one, and that we are okay, and that we are essence incarnate, and that we are kind of potential. Most people, that's something that, the Buddha and people like the Buddha have to show us is possible. And the pain of not feeling that is so bad, and the terror that comes as a result of it, that we develop, what we do is we take our gifts, we take the very gifts that we have, and we kind of use them to to try to get back to that thing we think we've lost, except the one that's doing that is the one that's terrified. The one that's doing that is the one that is separated. And so that one is not actually seeing the situation correctly. They're seeing the situation from a small self that feels separated, reality versus me. And I'll just say, like, for myself as a person, I can remember feeling so much love for people, so much compassion for people. I can remember feeling like I knew what truth was. And then when I started to work with the Enneagram, I realized that my experience of love, my experience of truth were so limited and skewed, as beautiful as they had been. And so part of how that happened was that so when we work with the body center, what we're reawakening is the capacity, or maybe awakening for the first time, depending on when did one actually get born and have these feelings still, or had we already been separated from them? It's different for each individual. But when we are in our body center, and we are practicing the ways that the Enneagram is inviting us to, with all the variations and nuances, as well as the unified piece of it, we are reawakening the capacity to experience reality as sensation, as this powerful Big Bang expression of the all that is. And it helps you actually experience that there's an intelligence in you that is not run by your thoughts about existence. It's not run by your emotional reactivity. It's a deep, ancient, ongoing, never-breaking wisdom and capacity for life force, and recognizing ourselves as one and feeling the inherent sacredness of that. So each of the types having a particular aspect of reality, or the divine, or the cosmos, or however you want to describe it, that they are kind of holding out to get back to, and maybe doing it in a misguided way, but reminding the rest of us that this is important. Creating practices for the body center that reawaken capacities help to ground the higher realization in a very real lived experience. Similarly, the heart types 2, 3, and 4 are reminding us of different qualities that have to do with intimacy and giving and receiving and connectedness and holding and the creativity of love. And again, the Enneagram, these different personality types are doing it in a misguided way, but the misguided, whatever it is they think they're trying to get to, is reminding all of us of some aspect of love, some aspect of the capacities of the heart to be related to things that the rest of us have forgotten somewhat. And the same thing with the head center. You've got the qualities of illumination and recognition and inner guidance, and the kind of causeless joy of realizing that life is completely full as it is, which means that we can turn our attention to possibility.
Well, Russ, let's go back to you, and I want to start to get a better picture for how we shift from just kind of, in a way, a typing orientation to a more dynamic evolutionary orientation to actualize these higher potentials. And I know you teach on the virtues a lot, that there's like each type it goes into a deeper, fuller, truer, more aligned expression. And so there's like a dynamism in that. And so how do we start to liberate more of that power in the Enneagram to propel us into that deeper, truer nature?
Yeah. Well, I think most people, if they've heard about this, probably start off just trying to figure out which of the 9 types fits them best. And that's a really good place to start. Most of us have some sort of impulse to wanting to understand ourselves better. And if we got a little extra time, we want to figure out our family members or our friends or our date or whatever. But really, if we just remember that the Enneagram type is not our identity, it's a pattern, a coping strategy, it's a psychological structure through which we have learned to cope with our difficult feelings, to try to get our needs met, and to handle whatever's going on. But as Jess was saying, this pattern has roots in some of our greatest and most natural gifts. So the idea is to bring awareness to what we usually take ourselves to be. We take ourselves to be this pattern. And we traditionally in the Enneagram describe that pattern by the suffering that Jessica was talking about, which is we call the passion. It's the core suffering from that disconnect from being, from presence, or if you're coming from a more traditional religious perspective, from God. Then that engenders what we call the fixation, which is a mental, it's in the mind, but it's a way of habitually thinking at things and organizing our experience so that it reduces the suffering of the passion. We're constantly trying to fix that suffering in a certain way that works well enough, but never exactly heals us. So the whole thrust of the Enneagram then, instead of just statically planting ourselves in one of these 9 types, becomes an opening to a whole inner set of experiences and inner relationships, really, between these different components. We start to open to these broader perspectives. One way that we can look at it is that as this intermarriage takes place, as the qualities of presence and gift coming through the 3 centers, as Jessica was just talking about them, as we are learning embodiment, groundedness, and opening to the natural kindness and sensitivity of our heart, as our mind becomes crisper and clearer, and we notice the quiet between our thoughts, we bring those different qualities into contact with the patterns. It's not like we're trying to get away from them. We actually want to sense them, hold them in compassion, and understand them from this deeper perspective. It's not the personality trying to understand or fix the personality. It's this deeper dimension coming into contact with what our ego patterns are, what the part of me that I'm living out of most of the time. In that process, a kind of internal fire starts to get cooking. And sometimes it actually feels like physical heat. We start to feel something is really changing in us. A lot of structure and discipline and friendship helps us stick with that process. Because if our ego had its way, we'd just say, okay, that's enough of that, and jump right back into whatever we think normal is, right? If we look at it from this perspective, normal means being identified with our fixated ego patterns. But if we keep rubbing against what's bugging us, we go deeper and deeper until we actually get into some of the well springs of our difficulties. But by now we've cultivated enough presence to hold those difficulties, something we objectively couldn't do when we were younger. It isn't like this. We're not looking at character flaws. We're not looking at mistakes. We're looking at an organic process by which human beings are offered the possibility of growing into something more than what would just bring us basic survival needs, what would bring us more into the sense of what a human being can be. And then we're getting into the realm of the virtues, as you mentioned, which are more about the living qualities that come out of our heart after our heart's been worked on for a while. And of course, one of the gifts of the Enneagram is that it gets very specific about these things. There are no vague generalities here. Once we get into the actual material, we look at very particular psychological structures, very particular difficulties, and very particular qualities of presence and being that come to our aid, you might say. So that whole process is what it's about, not just which one am I.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that focalizing into the specificity. It's a great opportunity to do that. Maybe if you can continue a little bit, Russ, and talk specifically about one virtue to give an example for folks. I know you're going to go into a lot more in your upcoming program, and then Jessa, you can build on that with an experiential exercise. We're trying to template this like recognition of the broad, in a way, mystical orientation, and then it gets really specific and granular, connected to the ways that your personality has been formed, and then how that can then be embodied and transformed in a new way. So, Russ, why don't you share specifically around the virtue of humility now?
Sure. Humility is the virtue related to point 2. So humility is the resolution of the passion or the suffering of pride. Now, we could say a lot about pride, and probably we will in the course, but for our purposes right now, let's just say that pride is the pattern of displacing our suffering. I'm not suffering, but those poor people over there are. That poor doggy is suffering. That little girl is suffering. And so we preoccupy ourselves with moving toward the needs and suffering of others as a way of not fully experiencing our own. So pride at its core has a kind of deep sense of self-rejection and shame. Our heart feels really cut off in a disastrous way. And it's really objectively too painful for a little boy or a little girl to stay with. So we override that suffering by focusing on others, and particularly focusing on others' needs. We try to override our sense of feeling rejected and unlovable or beyond the reach of love by trying to prove that love is in us by doing wonderful things for people, whatever that may be, given our particular life and talents. So when presence starts to work on that, when we actually start to presence the layers of pride, and believe me, it's not an overnight one-shot deal. We spend many years maybe looking at the layers and layers and layers of the ways we have, out of an attempt to be kind to ourselves, we've learned to deaden ourselves to that suffering. That's true for all 9 types, but it happens a very particular way here, where I have learned by focusing on others, sacrificing for others, giving to others, noticing the needs of others, it just keeps me out of landing in the extent of my own destitution, neediness, feeling of being absolutely forsaken on a heart level. Once that presence starts to get in there, we discover slowly that we are not forsaken, that our needs do matter, that we don't have to be angels in order to be loved. We don't have to be spiritual masters in order to be loved. We don't have to be the last one in line in order to be loved. We merely have to be receptive to our own human self. And that is humility. Humility is the occupying, sensing, feeling, and holding of our very delicate, beautiful, raw, messy, contradictory, sometimes suffering humanity. It's when our heart is turned so that we stop rejecting ourselves. We start to hold our own suffering, or you might say we're receptive to the deeper elements of grace holding our suffering in such a way that we now have more to actually bring to others, and in a way that doesn't emotionally and spiritually and even physically exhaust us. So you could say humility is seeing the spirituality and holiness in just being a messy, needy, beautiful, one-of-a-kind human being.
I love that. I love that. And I love the way you painted the picture of is how the pride is a kind of a compensation that dissolves into this deeper, more enlivening field of humility. And Jessica, I wonder if you could build on this and help show how we can build an experiential practice that helps that transmutation happen in our lives.
So as we go into this, Stephen, I'm reminded of the beautiful poem by Rumi about prayer. And interestingly, he says that in order to do real prayer, we must hatch out the hopelessness inside. And that correlates with, in modern times, the 12-step program, where the very first step for redemption or conversion, if you will, which is what we're really talking about here, is how do we reconstellate around our true nature instead of the false nature, is that that people in 12-step programs have to admit that they're powerless over whatever it is that's got them, whether it's an addictive substance or a behavior or whatever, and that life has become unmanageable because of that. And so moving into the experience or the pathways in ourselves that open to true humility, I want to say to people, first of all, that from a place of true humility, where there's nothing to defend, nothing to promote about ourselves, no image to make, we really can just be with ourselves as we are, with a certain amount of respect and love, and be with others as they are. Russ alluded to this at the end, but it creates such a bigger container, such a vast spaciousness, if you will, that allow the real thing, the real qualities of love and compassion and caring that want to come forth from the heart to come forth. So I would like to invite everyone now to make contact with your breath, to just feel the sensations of your breath. Like you're breathing in, and that's producing sensation in your mouth and your throat and your rib cage, your lungs. And maybe if you're sensitive enough, you can even feel how it's producing sensation everywhere in your body. And because the first thing to understand about the development of the virtues of the heart is they're not some spiritual ideal to rise up to, something to attain. That's the ego's version of being a better person. To come into the virtue is to understand that everything that we've ever wanted everything that's possible through the heart is actually here in this moment. And if we will let our hearts be worked on by the power of now, to borrow a phrase from Eckhart Tolle, we will allow ourselves to be worked on, to have our hearts worked on by the intimacy of this moment and the wisdom of this moment. Something much more creative can come forth. And that's what humility makes possible. Just quickly feeling the sensations of your body, not going anywhere else. There's nowhere else to go. It really is all here. Allow yourself to be aware of a person in your life that you love utterly, someone that you would be willing to perhaps die for, and even more courageously to live for, to bring yourself, your full self forth for. And imagine, or just right in this moment, to see that you have the opportunity to let them feel loved by you right now. So let them feel loved by you. Experience the joy, the fulfillment, flow of letting your heart, to use a phrase from Mary Oliver, the poet, just let yourself love what you love. You love this person. What is it like to let those feelings flow uninterruptedly, unrestrictedly? Take a few deep breaths with that. Now, if they would drop something and break it, if they would forget to pick up something for you at the store, if they hurt your feelings because they didn't get something about you, and that's a particular ouch for most of us. We really want to be gotten and seen. That's a real human need. But if this person that you love that utterly, if they did any of those things, would you not love them? In fact, if you find for this person that you love so utterly, it's almost like your heart wants to say, I love you anyway. And let your heart feel that part of, I love you anyway. Anyway. Okay. Now imagine, or just be with the truth that they love you too. Can you, in your inner mind right now, let them love you with the same degree of joy and flow and even ferocity that you were feeling? Just see if you can let that in. And I would suggest that what you do is, from the perspective of sensation, is breathe in. And when you breathe out, literally soften the center of your chest physically. Make it more vulnerable. And we're so ashamed of being loved when we come from this smaller place. You might have to take some really deep breaths and let it in by softening even more. Now imagine what their heart would feel like if you dropped something and broke it, or you forgot to pick up something for them at the store, or they didn't get you one day. Imagine if that happens. You forgot something, you didn't get them, you dropped something, you didn't do as well as you wanted to do. Imagine if you told them, it's not okay for you to love me anymore. I'm not good, I'm bad. Imagine how that would feel to their heart, to not be able to let that love flow. So offer them instead, you can love me even when I make mistakes. I will not shut off the flow of your heart. I will not ask you to turn away from me. I will not deny you the joy of that flow. And let love like work on the places that you're contracted around the way you feel about yourself. And you might even in this moment feel a little bit of what we call remorse. Both Gurdjieff and the Dalai Lama talk about remorse. It's a very useful spiritual alchemical and psychological alchemical process. And my beautiful friend Jennifer Wellwood has a poem where she says that the jewel inside has grown dusty, and what is it out there that could have captured your attention for so long that you forgot about this? Feel the tragedy of that error and see that even now the tears of your grief are wiping the dust away. And so let your heart melt. You are a human being and you are lovable. And that's just one facet of opening up to humility.
Well, thank you, Jessica. It's really clear from just the tenderness with which you lead the experiential processes. It just, there's this deep integration that happens. And Russ, let's go back to you. Another area that is really important to today's exploration is this idea of holy ideas. And specifically, if we can illuminate that, we don't have a lot of time now since we've taken a little more, but if we can talk a little bit about the holy idea of inner freedom as it relates to what we've just been talking about in the virtue of humility.
Yeah. Well, that name for this holy idea of freedom seems odd at first to go with point 2. Why would freedom be there? Wouldn't that go with one of the other points, maybe point 7, something like that? You know, why freedom with the 2? I think it has to do with the fact that all of our ego structures, all of our ego patterns are born out of relationship. All of the psychological patterns are woven out of what psychologists call object relations. So our sense of self is always tied to a sense of another. And we project that on everything. It's why we tend to date the same kind of people over and over, get into the same kind of relationship problems. But we even can bring those patterns to nature, to animals, to God. Our God looks very suspiciously like some of our own history, both in terms of what we're longing for and in terms of what we might fear. So when the mind is transformed by presence, one of the things that happens is those object relations start to relax. And so the result of that is those patterns by which we kind of locate ourselves and locate the other person and kind of make sure we're still both here in the way that our ego needs us to be, well, they relax. And as they relax, there is just an openness, a simplicity of being. There's no assumption of who I'm with or what is supposed to happen. There's no happy ending I'm trying to steer for. We start to realize how much we have been enslaved by our unconscious notion of certain happy endings needing to happen for us to be okay. All egos have that in some way. And again, you can see how each of the points is highlighting a kind of universal part of the human journey. But when that relaxes, when I'm not trying to get anything from people, when I'm not trying to push anything away from people, we move from these pattern structures of relationship to living, dynamic, organic relatedness. And relatedness is a way that we experience presence. But here in the holy idea of the 2, everything is related in some sense. It's all the living, interacting expression of the whole universe happening right here in me and you, and the whole thing is right here. But the freedom that brings is the freedom to actually participate freshly with each moment, with whoever's in front of me. And even when there's nobody in front of me, there's still the relatedness with myself. When this has not come to pass, even when I'm alone, I'm stuck in certain internal programmed historic relationships with myself that are based on external relationships, feeling rejected, feeling frustrated, feeling scared and attached, and so forth. This isn't an effort to try to get rid of those things. And that's very important to say. We're not trying to reject our rejection, which doesn't even make sense if you think about it, just adding another layer of rejection. And then we just get ourselves in a big pretzel. It's more that as we see the truth of what's here, as the presence in our body, heart, and mind really pulls us to the point where we see the constructed nature of how we're interpreting our interactions with the beings that we're with. It is just the arising of a deeper truth about how reality is. The only other thing I'd say about this doesn't eliminate relationship. We still have relationships. We need them to conduct our lives. We have agreements and things we do with people that are important in carrying on. But in our soul, we're no longer trying to squeeze our selfhood out of those relationships. We're not trying to extract from those relationships something to make us feel okay about ourselves anymore. We've actually come through, and now we actually can be with someone, which is in itself a great freedom. So there's much more to say about that. And of course, we will say more about that. But I think that's might give everyone a taste of what we mean by that early freedom.
Well, you speak with such poetic depth. I feel like whole worlds of understanding open up. And so that's part of why I know that people are in for a real treat, a real transformational journey when they join the two of you for your upcoming 17-week program. So let's talk about that now. First of all, we're very grateful that you've partnered with us on this, because it is so important that Enneagram isn't just keeping us on the surface, but that it is a tool for our awakening and healing and realization, for the expression of our highest virtues and the opening of our full heart. It's like we're in the business of creating evolutionary shifts in individuals, and you're really offering the deepest sort of transmission of wisdom and insight and love and practice in this program. So it's called the Experiential Depth Approach to the Enneagram. Embody the virtues, live your essence, and ground higher realizations in your daily life. So you can find the page described at thedepthapproach.com. Again, that's thedepthapproach.com. And it's going to be a 17-week journey. And so this allows a real unfolding of the teachings, of being able to illuminate all the different types, the higher, the virtue dimension of those types, the practices to embody it. It really is not just a surface skimming of some ideas about the Enneagram, but using it as a portal to your own higher, truer, deeper nature. So I'd love maybe start with you, Jessica. Just share a little bit about what you're most excited for people to come out of this program with when they take the 17-week journey with you.
This is the most comprehensive class on the Enneagram that we're doing with the shift thus far. Russ and I have both done together and individually deep, very deep programs, and we've covered a tremendous amount of territory. But in this 17-week program, it's like there's going to be the centers, the instincts, the virtues, the holy ideas, essence. Obviously, the types get referred to. We're starting out with two very in-depth classes. One is about depth itself, our original nature, and what the depth approach is. And the second one is about inner work and what is going to go on when we do inner work with that depth. And then we go into all of these parts of the Enneagram, and then we go into relationships for two classes. And then we go in aspects of God for two classes. And we're, by the way, bringing in the renowned Reverend Cynthia Bourgeault, amazing practical mystic, practical wild mystic that she is, to help illuminate some of those aspects of the divine. And then we're going into a class that's just devoted to bringing this to the streets, bringing it to the world, bringing it to social activism. So this is the first time I would say that Russ and I together are bringing such an incredibly comprehensive program So for all of those reasons, I'm really excited about this program, but it's primarily that I think we ourselves are on the edge of how do we contact that depth and stabilize it in actualization.
Beautiful. Well, it's an amazing curriculum, and it really weaves so many threads together that people are fascinated by, like the instincts and the virtues and the holy ideas, all these dimensions of the Enneagram that have been a little bit more in the background in the public eye, but really allow us to use it as terrain to open up so much more. So, Russ, in your own words, again, all of you watching, you can see the course laid out in detail at thedepthapproach.com. It's going to be a live streamed video program, and then you're going to get access to all the videos and the audios and the transcripts and the online community, and then we have a whole bunch of bonuses, and I'll talk about those in a moment. But Russ, I'd love for you to just share in your own words, what are you most excited about to deliver in this upcoming 17-week program?
Well, if we're really sincere about studying this stuff, and Jessica and I both are, then we're always learning new stuff. There's always new discoveries popping, and I'm having them all the time. I have had a couple of them in the last week, really big shifts of how I look at all this material. So it's always fun for me to share new stuff, them finding out, hearing new expressions of Jessica's work and how she's approaching it. I think this is the first time we've gone to this kind of depth also in the depth of the material we're looking at. Going beyond just the basic information about the types, but also having a lot of time to do experiential work together. Because ultimately, while it is helpful in some sense to understand this material, it doesn't really change us unless we internalize it. And for that, we need to have experiential work. And I think that Jessica and I work very well together in that regard. So I'm sure that we're going to have some good adventures and good conversations and good questions and answers coming up. The other thing is just this is my first time to do video with Shift. I think Jessica's done a course on video before, but this is my first time to actually talk to everybody where you can see me. So that poses all sorts of interesting new possibilities where you're getting not just the tone of my voice, but you can see my facial expressions. You can see my eyes and see my body language. And I think probably there's a lot of my teaching that's coming out through those things, even though my words are coming through to give a certain message. There are other messages going out. And I look forward to experiencing that with Jessica as well. But I think, we've made a really, I would say that I'm very proud of the work we've done with Shift so far. I think that we've done a really amazing journey of exploring how we can use this medium and this wonderful platform that you've created here to bring people into a deeper experience of the Enneagram work. And I think that is also my cutting edge. Can we take people even to more profound transformational places via technology with this added support of a visual medium? So that's all very interesting and exciting to me too.
We're very excited ourselves. And there's something more intimate about the visual medium that just leaves us feeling more connected. And as you said, it's a deeper transmission of the teachings. So
Yes.
Again, you can find all the details at thedepthapproach.com. The course is going to begin on August 9th. It's going to run on Thursdays at noon Pacific. That's 3 Eastern, noon Pacific. Even if you can't make the live classes, you can still get the full value by participating with the downloads and the recordings and the transcripts and the weekly exercises. And I also want to bring your attention to, we got a number of great extra bonuses. I'll just touch upon them fairly quickly. You can see them described in more detail at thedepthapproach.com. So there's a recording with Jessica Dibb and various guest couples called Actualizing Deep Dyadic Love for Couples Through the Enneagram. So very specific application into the relational field. There's a recording from Jessica and other voices of the Enneagram and voices of the Enneagram in their own voices, the types speak. This helps you ground a deeper understanding of what is the core patterning of each type. That's very helpful. Then we also have an audio dialogue between Russ, Hudson, and Robert Holden, another eminent expert in the Enneagram, called the Enneagram and Purpose. And we've got Can the Diversity of the Enneagram Support Diversity, Wellness in the World? This is a dialogue that was hosted by Jessica with Reverend Shelley Best, Alex Senegal, Chief Mike Alexander, a number of other people. So that's a really fascinating other bonus. And we have one extra bonus that's available just today. So we like to do the extra bonus as an incentive for you to go to the page at thedepthapproach.com and give it a read, tune in. And if you're excited to really open up your world and transform to access the deeper nature and really engage in a spiritual community that's using the Enneagram to go much further than perhaps any of you have ever considered going, then you have an extra incentive to do so today. So this is actually a dialogue between Jessica and Claudia Naranjo, one of the eminent elders of the field of the Enneagram. It's called the 27 Enneagram Subtypes, a unique and nuanced view. So Jessica, you want to say anything about that special bonus, which people get when they sign up by midnight tonight?
Well, Claudio is just, I have such endearment for him. He's just been such a pioneer, and he's such a kind of mystical, innovative thinker. And when we get on these conversations together, you can tell that he's not just saying something from rote. He's actually like feeling into the material at the time. And I experienced him as doing that with this particular one. It just, he was sort of trying to feel for something new in each little subtype. And his approach is somewhat unique. He has this sense of type and instinct mixing to create a new alchemical kind of personality. And I just think that anybody who listens to it will feel stimulated to think a little bit more deeply about themselves and their loved ones.
Beautiful. Well, that's a real blessing to have that when you sign up by midnight tonight. So again, you can find all the details at thedepthapproach.com. You get the special bonus when you sign up today. We've kept this whole 17-week journey very, very accessible. It's kind of remarkable. It's just 4 payments of $167. Or if you pay in full, you save a bit more than 10% at $597. So this is a ton of value. You can do this from your home. You can continue your studies. You get all the transcripts and videos. You get the bonuses. It's a real wealth of information and practical guidance on how to transform using the Enneagram. So we're really blessed that Russ and Jessica have teamed up on this, and we have special guests like Cynthia Bourgeau. So it's going to be a real treat. So I encourage you to go ahead and get signed up. There's really no risk, a money-back guarantee of your satisfaction, and get so signed up today at thedepthapproach.com. So Russ and Jessica, we're pretty much out of time here. Just any quick few closing thoughts for anyone who is on the fence about whether to join you for your 17-week journey.
Well, I can offer something, Stephen. First of all, I really want to thank you and Dan and Allison and Gina and a lot of people at The Shift, because this price is incredible. I mean, Russ and I really wanted to keep the price down because we're feeling the urgency in the world and we want people to have the benefit of community. And this is far underneath what you guys would usually charge for a 17-week program. And I'm just really grateful to you. And I wanted to say that. So I want to encourage people. It's a special opportunity. And secondly, I want to say that, this course, you really can be open to it, whether you're a beginner to the Enneagram or you're somebody that's been studying and working with the Enneagram for 30 years. And here's why. Because Russ and I are inviting you to join an immersive community, an immersive practice community of the Enneagram. And so whether you're learning it for the first time or you already know a lot of things, what part of what we mean by the depth approach is we're gonna work together for 17 weeks to make real transformation. And Russ and I are also going to be sometimes sharing our own changes and transformations that we're going through. We just really want to create, again, this immersive practice community together. So I invite you to if you feel called to jump in with us, we would be honored.
Fantastic. Russ? any closing words and thoughts from your heart?
Well, I think Jessica covered a lot of it very well. I mean, yes, of course, the thanks to the shift and all the support we're getting in doing this, but also in doing our best to make it accessible to more people. I'm excited about the fact that there is a growing population out there, and maybe you listening right now are one of those people. There's a population of people who want the real Enneagram, the deeper Enneagram, the transformational Enneagram. And whereas there's a lot of stuff out there we can learn in books, things we are picking up online from chat rooms and so forth, to be involved in an actual community of authentic development and practice around which the Enneagram work, what can I say? It's with that the Enneagram actually comes to life. It's with that the purpose of the Enneagram becomes clear, and how it can help us individually and collectively in this very frontier time that we're living in. So I think it's an extraordinary opportunity for us to come together to explore the deeper meanings of these ancient ideas and modern psychological insights, and to see what we can do about contributing to a wider weave of human cooperation for the challenges that we are most certainly facing in the coming years.
Well, that's clearly what it's all about. So I appreciate the heart and soul and depth that you both offer. Thank you for today. Thank you for your upcoming program. And for those of you who want to go deeper with these two beautiful beings, please do so by the end of today, and you get the extra bonus with Claudia Naranjo when you do. So just go to thedepthapproach.com. You can read all about their upcoming 17-week journey, and hope you feel called to undertake it with them. I know you'll be very blessed, and you'll have lasting transformation for years to come. So thank you all. Thank you. And again, sign up for their upcoming program at thedepthapproach.com. Many blessings.
Yep.